The prairie didn't speak in words, it whispered in rust, in dry grass scratching wind, in the soft creak of wood left too long in the sun. That was all Micah Granger had listened to for years. And he'd grown used to the silence. Some men feared it. Some went mad. Micah had made peace with it, let it thread through his bones like smoke, until he became part of it. He lived alone on Three Fence Ranch, a stretch of yellowed land that folded into the hills like an old paper map. The house was small, 2 rooms and a porch that sagged under the weight of memories. The barn stood farther back, still upright, though Micah had stopped repairing the east wall after last year's flood. Nothing inside needed much shelter anymore. The horses were gone. The cattle thinned out with the drought. All that remained were fences and ghosts. Each morning began the same. He boiled water, drank it black, then stood at the gate long enough to hear the hinges groan. The sound reassured him. Things that moved meant things that stayed. He kept the gate closed, though no one had passed through in months. Maybe years. His face was lined and leathered, the color of river rock. The kind of man people described as stoic, though that was just a word others used when they didn't know how to read grief. He hadn't spoken to another soul since the last cattle drive. And even then, he hadn't had much to say. There'd been a time when laughter lived here. When the porch was strung with bells and wild sage, when his wife would hum while stringing corn, and their daughter, a girl with honey in her voice, would dance barefoot through puddles after summer rains. But the rains stopped. And the fever came. And then the graves were dug behind the barn. He buried sound with them. What remained now was rhythm. Chop wood. Fix wire. Patch saddle. Breathe. Repeat. He didn't need people anymore. Didn't want them. Folks carried noise and questions and their own particular weight of brokenness. Micah had enough of that already. But that morning, something shifted. It wasn't the weather. The sky was the same pale bruised blue. It wasn't the land, still dry, still quiet. It was the horses. 10 of them. He saw them first as shadows along the far ridge, where the canyon mouth opened like a yawn in the hills. They rode in single file, slow and deliberate, not like bandits or riders on the run, but like ghosts with purpose. Micah stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, though he didn't raise it. He squinted, heart slowing rather than quickening. The riders were Apaches. He hadn't seen one in years, not since the skirmishes south of the wash ended and the forts got quiet. 10 of them, lean, dust-wrapped, their faces unreadable from this distance. One rode with something bundled in front of him, a child maybe. Another held a long spear adorned with hawk feathers. Their ponies moved like smoke, every step certain. They weren't hiding. And they weren't armed for war. Micah didn't move. The land held its breath. Even the wind stalled. The riders reached his gate and stopped. The leader, a man whose face bore the sun's scars, dismounted. He stepped forward, slow and proud, until he stood just beyond the fence. Micah met his gaze. The man lifted a hand. Not in threat. In greeting. Behind him, a woman remained astride her horse. She was younger than the rest, perhaps mid-20s, and unlike the others, her eyes didn't scan the land. They locked onto Micah, steady and sure. There was no fear in them. Only weariness. And something else. Something that made Micah feel suddenly seen, like a nail finally fitting the groove it was shaped for. The man spoke, his voice worn thin by wind and journey. Need shelter. One night. Micah said nothing. The words drifted between them, hanging like snow that might melt or stay. His fingers twitched against the rifle, not from fear but memory. He remembered the raids. He remembered the stories. But he also remembered something deeper, the sound of his daughter asking why people hated strangers who hadn't done them harm. The Apache man did not repeat himself. The woman behind him shifted in her saddle, and the child stirred in her arms. A cough. Shallow, tight in the chest. The kind of sound Micah had heard in the winter his wife stopped breathing. He exhaled through his nose. There was enough space in the barn. Enough wood for a fire. Enough oats for horses. But this wasn't about supplies. It was about the gates. For years, Micah had kept them closed, not out of fear of what came in, but out of dread for what might be asked of him. Kindness had cost him everything once. It had torn him wide open, and there hadn't been enough left to stitch back. But now 10 figures stood before him, not demanding, not begging, just waiting. Micah stepped forward. He unlatched the gate. It swung open with the sound of surrender. The Apache leader nodded once, and motioned the group forward. They entered without haste, like pilgrims into a sacred place. As they passed, the woman's horse came nearest to Micah. Her eyes met his again. There was no smile. No words. But her gaze lingered. He felt it in his chest like the first crack of thunder before a rain. She passed, and for the first time in years, the dust from another's footsteps drifted across his boots. Micah stood there long after they disappeared into the yard. He realized something strange then. The gate, still open behind him, no longer made him uneasy. What unsettled him most was the silence, not the absence of it. But how it suddenly felt different. Like it had been waiting all this time to carry someone else's story too. Micah didn't sleep that first night. Not truly. He lay in the wooden chair by the hearth, boots still on, rifle resting across his knees, though he didn't hold it like a threat, just an old habit trying to comfort itself. Outside, the air cooled and filled with unfamiliar sounds, horse breath, boot steps, whispers in a language he didn't know but somehow trusted. It had been so long since anyone else had breathed under his roof, even if they slept just in the barn. They made no trouble. Left no trace but warmth in the rafters. At sunrise, he brewed coffee and stood at the edge of the porch as the steam rose around his face. From the barn came a low hum, rhythmic, someone chanting, almost singing, but so soft it seemed meant more for the animals than the people. When he stepped closer, he saw her. The Apache woman from the day before. She stood barefoot in the straw, sleeves rolled, braiding rope with patient fingers. The child she carried was now swaddled in a nest of hides, asleep beside a warm milk tin. She didn't look up when Micah entered. That struck him. Most folks flinched when a man appeared in a doorway, especially one holding a gun like it was part of his spine. But she just kept weaving. He cleared his throat. She glanced up then. Her eyes were dark, not black, not brown, but the deep color of wet earth, steady as river stone. There was no softness in her gaze, not yet. Only the quiet that follows loss. She's been coughing, Micah said, nodding toward the child. The woman's hands slowed. Then stopped. Dust, she replied. Her voice was low, shaped by silence more than speech. And hunger. Micah set the rifle aside. There's sage in the back, he murmured. Mint too. If you boil it together, might ease the lungs. She tilted her head, not in surprise, but as if measuring him anew. Then she nodded. I will gather. Their words ended there, but something else had begun. By noon, the others emerged one by one, respectful of the land, like they'd studied it long before they stepped onto it. 2 of the older men mended a section of broken fence without being asked. One of the younger boys fetched water from the creek, eyes always scanning, like a deer too familiar with arrows. They moved like people who didn't expect to stay, but still treated everything they touched as worth preserving. Micah watched from the corral. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself, but their presence didn't rattle him. In fact, it calmed something that had been coiled inside for years. Maybe it was because they didn't ask questions. Didn't offer condolences or empty chatter. They worked, rested, cared for one another. They carried pain the way the earth carried scars, without shame, without trying to hide. The leader, the man who had spoken the day before, introduced himself that evening without fanfare. Name's Tahoma. He didn't ask for Micah's. Just sat beside the well and passed him a flask of pine tea. Micah sipped. Bitter, clean? Like bark in winter. Tahoma nodded toward the girl. My niece. Nalina. Her mother was taken near Tucson. Died sick. We've been riding ever since. Micah didn't respond right away. The name sat heavy in his chest. He looked toward her. She was crouched in the garden now, trimming mint with a small blade that glinted like river glass. The child slept in a cotton sack on her back. "She works like she's done it here before," he said. "She works like she wants to live," Tahoma replied. That night, they ate in silence, jerky, beans, bannock cooked over coals. Micah didn't know when it happened, but the house, the barn, the very air around him had shifted. It didn't feel taken over. It felt restored. He sat on the porch, feet on the rail, watching stars blink into being. Nalina emerged then, child wrapped against her chest, a bowl of mint water in her hand. "She still coughs," she said, kneeling by the porch. "Can I heat this inside?" Micah stood, opened the door. She didn't thank him, just passed through like it was natural. Like she belonged. Inside, she lit the stove, worked quickly, precisely, like someone who had learned to survive by mastering small things. Micah stood near the window, watching her but not watching her. "Your daughter?" she asked softly, glancing at a small pair of shoes resting on the mantel. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, he nodded toward the fire. "That chair was hers," he said. Nalina didn't ask more. She only bent her head, whispered something to the child, and poured the warm mint water into a horn cup. As she left, she paused by the door. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. No more. But Micah felt them all the way down. That night, sleep found him before his thoughts could run too far. He dreamed of the gate swinging open again. Only this time, he was the one walking through it. At dawn, the soldiers came. The soldiers came without dust or warning. 3 of them. Young, clean-shaven, faces full of law but lacking memory. Their uniforms still held the shine of towns and parade squares, not the faded grime of trail justice. One wore a silver badge on his chest, polished like a threat. They didn't dismount. Just halted their horses near the outer gate and watched. Micah stepped out first, hands loose, unarmed but not empty. He didn't need a gun to draw a line. The one with the badge spoke first. "Got word of Apache movement near here. You seen any?" Micah didn't blink. "No." The soldier squinted, shifted in his saddle like his conscience itched. "You alone?" Micah let the quiet stretch. Then he turned his head, just slightly, toward the barn where the others stood unseen. "Been alone a long time," he said. The soldier gave a tight smile, the kind a man wears when he doesn't want to believe he's being lied to. He looked past Micah, scanning the hills. "Well, if you see anything, you know where Fort Hagen is." Micah didn't nod. Didn't invite him further. The soldiers left, horses snorting. But they rode slow, too slow. Watching. Thinking. That night, no one slept easily. Inside the barn, Nalina sang again. This time it was softer, like a thread woven through the rafters. Micah leaned near the window, listening without meaning to. The child coughed less. The mint must have helped. Or maybe it was her presence. Steady hands. A voice that carried calm even in sorrow. The next morning, Micah found her near the edge of the garden, pulling weeds with her bare hands. The skin around her knuckles was cracked, the dirt stained deep. "You don't have to," he said. "I do," she replied. "We eat from this ground." She didn't look up, but she smiled, not wide, not bright, just the kind that happens when someone is quietly glad they're doing something that matters. Micah crouched beside her. "The frost lines early this year," he murmured. "I know," she said. "We'll take the roots before then." There was a rhythm forming. Not routine. Something older. Like a slow return to music after years of silence. By the 3rd day, the others began calling him brother. Not in English, but in gesture. A nod. A shared meal. A hat passed across a beam to shield sun from seed. Micah gave them space. But he gave them tools too, his best ones. The ones he hadn't let anyone touch since his brother died. He watched Nalina from the porch most afternoons. She worked hard but never harsh. She held the child on her back as if carrying joy instead of burden. She never hurried, never wasted motion. Every act was deliberate, gentle. She spoke more now. Not often. But enough. Told him her father was a tracker. Her mother, a singer. Both gone. She didn't weep. She didn't harden. They left songs behind, she said once. I just follow them. Micah remembered his wife's lullaby. How it used to drift through the rooms long after the baby had fallen asleep. One evening, he brought out a carved bird, rough cedar, wings outstretched. Used to make these, he said. Stopped for a while. Nalina took it in her hands like it was something sacred. Why this one? She asked. Hawk, he said. They ride alone, but never forget how to return. She turned it over, smiling. Then it should have your name. The child reached for it. Micah laughed. The sound startled him. He couldn't remember the last time his own breath had shaped joy. Later that week, rain came, soft and unannounced. The kind that doesn't flood or threaten. Just enough to turn the dust to dark clay, enough to paint the fence posts with memory. Micah stepped outside and stood in it, let it fall across his skin like forgiveness. He saw Nalina at the well, hands stretched out, face tilted to the sky. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her smile was open now, wild as prairie bloom. She looked at him, eyes sparkling. You're not alone anymore, she said. He wanted to answer, but the words caught somewhere inside. Instead, he stepped beside her and opened his palm to the rain. That night, the child slept without coughing. And for the first time, Nalina sang inside the house. Not quietly. Not in sorrow. She sang with her eyes closed. A song without fear. Micah sat in the corner and let it wash over him like wind across wheat. After the melody faded, she opened her eyes and looked at him. You've buried someone, she said gently. Micah nodded. She didn't ask who. Didn't need to. You still carry them, she added. He looked down at his hands. I don't know how to set them down, he whispered. Nalina reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Then we carry them together. Micah didn't speak. But the tears that welled behind his eyes didn't fall from grief. They came from something lighter. Hope, maybe. Or the memory of it. Outside, the rain stopped. The stars blinked free from the clouds. The gate stood open. And in the distance, a rider watched from the ridge. Micah woke before the sun, not to the rustle of wind or the creak of his porch, but to stillness. A thick, too perfect quiet that pressed against the house like a held breath. He stepped outside barefoot, breath frosting in the pale light. The rain from the day before had dried in patches, leaving behind the dark prints of boots where the Apaches had walked, woven into the soil like old songs. Nalina sat by the fire pit, already awake, arms wrapped around the child. She looked up when he stepped near, but her smile didn't come as easily. Micah knew that look. It was the kind a body wore when it sensed something wrong before words could explain it. They were seen, she murmured. Micah didn't ask how she knew. She came from people who read wind like parchment, and listened to birds the way others listened to clocks. They'll return? He asked. She nodded once. He let the fire crackle between them for a moment before he said, Then we'll meet them. That evening, Harv Mathers came riding up the trail, heavy on the saddle, jaw tight with certainty. His gray mare kicked up dust in silence as she neared. Harv didn't tie her. Didn't plan to stay long. Micah met him at the gate. You're housing em, Harv said flatly. Don't lie. Micah didn't blink. I didn't say you were lying, Harv went on. I said don't. From the barn, Tahoma stepped forward. He didn't carry a weapon. Didn't need to. His presence alone was a kind of flame that made men step cautiously. Harv noticed. His hand twitched toward his belt. Micah stepped between them. They're here because they need rest, not trouble. Harv spat. Them boys from the fort won't care if they're here to pray or pick flowers. They'll bring rifles and fire. And when they do, they won't knock. Micah's voice came out low and sharp. Then let 'em try. Harv leaned closer. You still grieving, Micah? I get that. But grief don't grow crops. And it sure as hell don't keep a ranch standing once the flames start. He turned to ride off but paused, just once. Fort Hagen's got your name now. I told them. Micah didn't move as the dust settled behind him. That night he didn't sleep. Neither did Nalina. They sat by the hearth, not speaking. The child snored softly on a mat of wool and straw. The fire danced across her small face like a blessing. You could leave, he said finally. I won't, she answered. The wind picked up before dawn, dry, bitter, like it came from a place where forgiveness had died long ago. By mid-morning the riders arrived. 6 soldiers. Dust-caked, jaws clenched like hammers. The one in front wore the same silver badge from before, but now his eyes held no doubt. You lied, he said simply. Micah didn't answer. Step aside. Micah didn't move. We've got orders. Tahoma stood beside him. Behind them, the others gathered, not hiding. Not pleading. We do not fight, Tahoma said. You don't need to, the soldier replied. The law fights for you. Micah's voice broke through. This land is mine. These people are under my roof. I won't hand them over. The soldier's lip curled. You think your name means more than the U.S. Army? No, Micah said, steady now. But it means enough to me. The silence that followed felt endless. The soldiers shifted, rifles twitching, but the moment held. Then a sound broke it, the child's cough, thin and human. Not the sound of a threat. Not the cry of war. Just a child, sick and trying to breathe. One of the younger soldiers looked away. The badge-bearer's hand lowered. We'll return, he said. And next time, we won't talk first. They rode off, slower than they came. As the dust settled again, Tahoma placed a hand on Micah's shoulder. You didn't have to. Micah met his gaze. Yes. I did. That night, the fire burned brighter. Not from fear but from resolve. They ate together, all of them. Nalina sat beside Micah now. Not close enough to draw attention, but near enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder when she leaned to pass the bread. After the meal, she brought out the cedar hawk. She had carved its wings wider now, smoothed the lines, added paint to its eyes. It's ready, she said. For what? To fly. She placed it on the fence post by the gate. Micah looked at her, really looked. I lost a child, he whispered. Nalina's eyes shimmered. I know, she said. Her hand found his, and this time he didn't pull away. They stood there in the stillness, as the stars gathered overhead. The gate stood open behind them. And from the tree line, lanterns began to glow, 6 of them. Moving slow. Measured. They had returned. The lanterns flickered like ghosts drifting through the trees, 6 flames bobbing in the dark, steady and slow. No galloping hooves this time, no barked commands or war cries, just the hush of heavy boots and cold iron intentions cloaked in silence. Micah stood by the gatepost, rifle in hand, but the gun wasn't what made him feel ready. It was the warmth pressed gently against his side, Nalina's presence, quiet as breath, firm as earth. Behind them, the Apaches waited in a half-circle near the barn. Not armed. Not hiding. Just present. Like roots that refused to be burned. Tahoma stepped forward with the calm of someone who had buried too many brothers to fear another funeral. He met Micah's eyes briefly, gave the smallest nod. If the end came, they would face it upright, side by side. The soldiers broke the tree line, their faces harder now, shaped by decisions made far away under polished roofs. The silver badge caught the firelight first. The man beneath it looked tired this time. His jaw was clenched, but his hands did not reach for his weapon. Granger, he said, voice even. I told you we'd come back. Micah didn't flinch. And we're still here. The officer scanned the group, his gaze lingering on the child curled in Nalina's shawl. The little girl coughed once, the sound weak but honest. A sound no army could label as threat. You're harboring known fugitives, The officer went on, but even he sounded weary of the script. There was a raid near Tucson. An officer killed. Reports say Apaches. These weren't there, Micah said. They've been here with me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was packed tight with the weight of history and suspicion, of things passed down through stories soaked in fear. It was the kind of silence men died in. But then something unexpected happened. The youngest soldier, no older than 20, stepped forward. He held a folded scrap of paper in his hand. My uncle was at the Wash Crossing, he said quietly. Said he saw 3 of them. Not 10. Said the rest helped nurse a settler woman through fever that same night. The badge bearer turned to him, surprised, but didn't stop him. They're not raiders, the boy went on. They're people. No one moved. Even the wind held its breath. Then Nalina stepped forward. Not to plead. Not to defend. But to speak. She moved slowly, the child sleeping against her like a soft truth. Her eyes were fixed on the officer, calm and steady. We came here because we were hunted. Not because we hunted. The officer's lips parted slightly, the iron edge of his voice dulled by something he couldn't name. Micah took a step beside her, voice low. This land has enough blood in it. It doesn't need more. The officer looked around, at the fences still standing, at the garden blooming under moonlight, at the 10 souls who had taken nothing but space to breathe. He looked at the little girl, curled like a seed against her mother's chest. He exhaled. You stay here, he said at last. But if anything happens again, if there's another raid. Micah raised his chin. Then you'll find me right here too. The soldiers didn't linger. One by one, they turned their mounts and disappeared into the dark, their lanterns shrinking to pinpricks, then to memory. The gate remained open. For a long moment, no one moved. The fire crackled like it had waited centuries to burn this quiet. Then Tahoma let out a breath, long and low. They'll remember tonight, he said softly. And so will we. The group slowly returned to the barn, but Micah didn't follow. He remained at the fence post, eyes fixed on the night beyond, the vast openness he'd once thought would bury him. Nalina touched his shoulder. You didn't owe us this, she said. I owed it to myself, he murmured. To the man I promised I'd be. Long ago. She smiled. Not the smile of thanks, but of kinship. A smile that said she'd walk beside him whether the road stayed smooth or split beneath their feet. In the days that followed, the ranch came alive in ways it never had. Tahoma helped dig a well closer to the garden. The young boy who'd once fetched water began painting animal tracks on the barn wall, each print a story. The elder woman, blind in one eye, began teaching Nalina's child songs made from wind and cedar. Micah built a bench under the oak tree near the graves. He sat there often now, not in mourning, but in remembrance. And sometimes, Nalina sat beside him. Not always talking, but always near. One evening, he found her in the workshop, carving cedar. Her hands moved with care, with love. She was shaping another hawk. For the little one? He asked. She shook her head. For you. He stared at it, the wings wide, but something else added this time. Small feathers tucked close against the bigger ones. A nestling. A home. Micah didn't speak. Instead, he wrapped his callous fingers over hers, gently guiding the knife's next motion. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was deeper than that. It was understanding. I thought I was finished, he whispered. She smiled. You were paused. That night 10 fires were lit around the barn, one for each Apache, each flame steady in the wind. They sat in a circle, stories rising like sparks to the stars. Stories of escape, of songs remembered, of names carried forward on breath alone. Micah told a story too, not with words but with his presence. With his silence now shaped like belonging. As the fires dimmed, Nalina laid the carved hawk by the door. The child curled against her, safe and small. Micah looked up at the stars. The same sky, but different somehow. He stood, walked toward the house, and before stepping inside, he turned back to the gate. Still open. Always now. And in the distance, unseen to the others, a lantern burned gently on the ridge, not a soldier's this time, but a settler woman, watching quietly, and holding a bundle in her arms.